On May 20th, 1967, a man walked out of the Manitoba wilderness with his clothes burned, his skin blistered in a perfect geometric pattern, and doctors quietly asking a question they didn't want on record. What did this man come into contact with? His injuries would become physical evidence: burns, scorched clothing, and lingering radiation at the center of what many still call Canada's most documented UFO case. For more than 50 years, investigators, skeptics, and believers have argued over one question. Was this proof of an extraordinary encounter, or something far more ordinary? This is the story of the Falcon Lake incident and why the truth still refuses to settle. This wasn't distant lights or a blurry photograph. This was close contact, burns, hospital records, and a trail of evidence that forced multiple government agencies to take the case seriously. The incident triggered investigations by the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and even drew attention from the U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book. And yet, for every piece of compelling evidence, there's a frustrating inconsistency that keeps the mystery alive. To understand why this case still divides skeptics and believers, we have to go back to that day in 1967 and reconstruct what happened, piece by painstaking piece. Stefan Michalak was an industrial mechanic from Winnipeg, about 50 years old at the time. Born in Poland, he was known as a practical, no-nonsense family man. His real passion was amateur geology. He spent his free time prospecting for minerals in the Canadian Shield: quartz, silver, anything promising. On the Victoria Day long weekend in May of 1967, he was alone in Whiteshell Provincial Park near Falcon Lake, working a quartz vein he'd explored before. It was a routine trip, one that would define the rest of his life. Around midday, the forest changed. Michalak later said a flock of geese suddenly erupted into chaos. Their honks echoed through the trees as he looked up and saw two glowing, oval-shaped objects descending from the sky. One hovered briefly, then shot away at incredible speed. The other continued downward and landed on a flat rock roughly 150 feet away. As its intense red glow faded, Michalak saw a smooth, metallic surface, stainless steel-like, seamless, about 35 feet across, topped with a dome. As a mechanic, he was struck by what wasn't there. No rivets, no seams, no visible method of construction. A sulfur-like smell hung in the air. He heard a low humming and hissing, like an electrical system under pressure. His mind didn't jump to aliens. He assumed it was a secret American military craft. Cautiously, he approached. A small opening appeared in the hull, flooding the area with blinding light. He claimed he could hear muffled, human-like voices inside. Thinking someone might need help, he called out in English, "Hey Yankees, do you need help?" No response. He tried Polish, then other languages he knew. The voices stopped. He would later say this was the moment his instincts screamed at him to run, and the moment he ignored them. Wearing thick protective gloves, Michalak moved closer and reached out to touch the craft. The surface was so hot it instantly melted the fingertips of his glove. Startled, he stepped back. The opening slammed shut. The object began to rotate, exposing a grill-like section of the hull. Suddenly, a blast of scorching hot gas erupted from the vents, hitting him squarely in the chest. His shirt and cap ignited. The force knocked him backward as he tore the burning fabric from his body. Through the pain, he looked up just in time to see the craft lift silently, tilt sideways, and shoot into the sky. He was left alone, nauseous, dizzy, vomiting violently. Barely able to walk, he staggered out of the forest. He stopped first at the Falcon Motor Hotel, then flagged down Highway Patrol Constable G.A. Salatki on the Trans-Canada Highway. Michalak warned the officer to keep his distance, convinced he'd been contaminated by radiation. Salatki later admitted he initially suspected intoxication, but noted there was no smell of alcohol. Michalak returned to Winnipeg and went straight to Misericordia Hospital. Doctors documented multiple irregular first-degree burns across his upper abdomen. The physical evidence was now officially on record. The injuries were too real and too strange to ignore. The RCMP, RCAF, and government health agencies all became involved. The burns were the first mystery. Early medical records described irregular, blotchy burns, but months later, something stranger appeared. By January 1968, the marks returned, this time forming a distinct grid-like pattern of raised sores, eerily similar to the vent Michalak described moments before the blast. Doctors had seen burns before, but none like this. He suffered recurring skin eruptions, headaches, dizziness, and weight loss for months. His 9-year-old son, Stan, later recalled a foul sulfurous smell, like burnt machinery, that seemed to seep from his father's skin. Then investigators examined the landing site. They found a 15-foot circular area stripped of moss and vegetation. Soil samples showed radioactivity significantly above natural background levels, documented in RCMP reports. A year later, small radioactive metal fragments were found fused into cracks in the rock. One fragment remains radioactive to this day. Burned clothing, melted gloves, a barren landing circle, radiation. No conventional explanation fit everything. Official RCMP and RCAF files concluded the case contained unexplainable aspects. Despite the evidence, skeptics have long raised serious concerns. Constable Salatki noted Michalak carried no prospecting gear, unusual for someone deep in the bush. More damaging was evidence handling. Despite RCMP instructions, Michalak returned to the site alone before investigators arrived, collecting samples himself. To skeptics, the scene was compromised. The radiation? Possibly natural radium deposits or contamination from radium-based luminous paint used on watch dials. And the burns? The famous grid pattern didn't appear until 8 months later. A psychiatrist at the Mayo Clinic described the later lesions as factitious, meaning likely self-inflicted, though he found no major mental illness. Skeptics argue this is exactly what a hoax looks like. A strange injury, followed months later by a more dramatic version. And ultimately, Michalak was the sole witness. On a busy holiday weekend, no one else saw a landed craft. Supporters counter that no single skeptical explanation accounts for everything. Michalak was widely described as sober, practical, and grounded. He didn't profit, he suffered. Health problems, media ridicule, family strain. He later said he deeply regretted ever coming forward. As his son Stan put it, if Dad hoaxed this, he was a freaking genius. And hoaxes usually collapse under scrutiny. This one refused to. Each piece of evidence alone might be explainable. Together, they resist every neat explanation. Even official reports stopped short of dismissing the case. They never endorsed a UFO, but admitted they couldn't solve it. For many, that's the most unsettling part. The Falcon Lake incident has become part of Canadian folklore. Books, documentaries, investigations. In 2018, the Royal Canadian Mint even issued a commemorative silver coin depicting the encounter. Michalak never claimed to see aliens. Until his death in 1999, he maintained it was likely a secret military craft. But he never changed what he said he saw or felt. If this was a hoax, it's one of the most elaborate and self-destructive hoaxes in Canadian history. And if it wasn't, then something very real landed in the woods of Manitoba and left scars that never fully healed. The Falcon Lake incident remains suspended between belief and doubt, a mystery that refuses to be solved. If you think this was a hoax, tell us how it was done. And if you don't, tell us what you think Stefan Michalak really encountered. We read every theory.